This episode was brought to you by Schedulicity. Welcome to episode 29 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Today, I share an on-air consultation call with yoga teacher Trevor Parks as he works on his About Me page for his website. The Connected Yoga Teacher was created so that you, the yoga teacher, can have access to knowledge, inspiration, and a community of other supportive yoga teachers between the teacher trainings, classes, and workshops that you are taking. The online community part of this is really unique. We have a private Facebook group that any yoga teacher can join. To find that, just go to our website, theconnectedyogateacher.com, and click on the join button. Just today, I checked that group and we are now at 500 yoga teachers. This group hasn't been going for a long time, but one thing in there is that there's strong community, a lot of support. All questions are welcome. Teachers are offering inspirations and ideas in there. It's a really fantastic place. So we'd love to have you join us in there. I want to give a little shout out to Diane and Lisa, who reached out to me last week through the voicemail option on our homepage. So if you go to the Connected Yoga Teacher homepage, there is a voicemail button there. You just click on it and you can leave me a little voicemail, just a little hello, or maybe you have some feedback or questions. It's a great way to connect. If you are new to this podcast, just so you know, I get what it means to be a yoga teacher. I have been a yoga teacher now for over 10 years, teaching weekly, group, and private classes. I really remember how it felt after I left my first 200-hour yoga teacher training. I felt a bit overwhelmed and alone in the wilderness of yoga entrepreneurship. Learning, teaching, and planning classes is one thing. We all are prepared for that and ready for that. But there's this whole other business side of things. We get into this with the consultation call today with Trevor Parks. Huge gratitude out to Trevor for today's episode. He had a question and I said to him, why don't we try and do this as an on-air consultation call? So that means that we're recording for you, the listener, as well as doing a consultation call. And from the look of our downloads, you guys really love these episodes. And so I will be bringing some more to you throughout our weekly podcasts. If you have ever felt a struggle to create an About Me page or a bio, I feel like this episode today is going to be a huge help to you. This really is one of the hardest pages on the website. I don't know if it's the home page or the About page, but those two are the hardest ones that I have seen working on my own websites and helping other yoga teachers with websites. Before we dive into the episode, here is our hot tip of the day from Matt and the team at Schedulicity.
And now, the Schedulicity hot tip of the week. The Schedulicity Marketplace hosts businesses from 50 different industries. This means you can get great exposure to the clients of non-competitive businesses in your area. Schedulicity provides an easy-to-fill-out template that lets you give potential clients the information they need to see that you're a good fit for them. You can also connect your Instagram account to provide some visual inspiration. Seeing other students or teachers demonstrating beautiful yoga poses can provide the mental motivation that takes someone from their couch to your studio. And remember, Google can match your content to local client searches.
Thank you, Matt. I learned about the Instagram feature and I actually use it all the time. I like how I can just add a hashtag to my post and it sends directly to my Schedulicity so people can see it. And I like that I can also filter them so that my cat photos don't end up on there, but just the ones I choose, just the ones that look like the podcast or my yoga business. Through the consultation calls that I do with yoga teachers, I really get to know yoga teachers and know what their individual style is. And I'm so excited that you guys are going to hear this from Trevor today. A lot of you will know Trevor because he comments often in our Facebook group for yoga teachers. He has lots of great stuff to share in there, and he's just really supportive. He's one of our big cheerleaders in there for yoga teachers, and he's been in there for a while. Trevor is from Covington, Georgia, and he's presently working away on his 300-hour certification. At the end of today's episode, I have a checklist for all of the listeners, and I'll share how to get that. You can go directly to our show notes, theconnectedyogateacher.com, and look for this episode. This checklist is to help you if you are creating an About Me page or a bio. Okay, Connected Yoga Teachers, let's dive in and listen to the consultation call. I'll meet you back here at the end for a little wrap up. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just what your yoga journey is like, when you started doing yoga, and where you're teaching now.
I'm teaching at a studio called Rev. I started yoga about 6 years ago. I've been teaching 3 years. I did adjustments in Ashtanga Mysore for 2 years before I got my teacher training. So I'd say I've been teaching about 4 years altogether. I started yoga because I read that Steve Jobs' only book on his iPad was Autobiography of a Yogi, and the rest is history.
Oh, I love it that that's what brought you to yoga first, was something by Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs is my hero.
Oh, I love it. So today I'm excited to dive into the About page. We've been having discussion in the Connected Yoga Teacher private Facebook group, and then back and forth. And this is something that honestly is a struggle for myself, as well as I think anyone who has a website or any yoga teacher is at some point needs to deal with a bio, even if they don't have a website. So this is a great topic for today. And I'm really excited because you've already done a few different drafts of your About Me, and you still keep tweaking it here and there. How's that feeling right now?
It's feeling never ending. I don't feel like I can settle.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think with websites in general, or just when we put content out there, we have to be okay with sometimes feeling like things are never done. And at the same time, I think we'll find a few tweaks today that might help you to feel like, that's maybe the part that I wanted to get more clarity on. But I have to say that I read the last one that you sent me yesterday, and I really like it. So we'll see what we can add to it on top of that. So first of all, the first step that I get people to think about when I do one-on-one consultation calls, and we're really looking at an About Me page, is who is your ideal yoga student? So can you think of someone, or kind of a combination of some yoga students that you have coming to class already that feel like your ideal yoga students right now? Do you have anyone in mind?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to give this person a fictitious name, or for our listeners, no one's going to know if it's their real name. So if you can think of one name for this yoga student, what would that be? Chad. Okay, perfect. So where does Chad live in relationship to the yoga studio where you teach? How far away?
I'm about walking distance.
Okay, so this is really good. And we start to, now let me ask, is this someone already coming to your class, or is this more of
Yes.
Yeah, okay, excellent. So then we start to look at what makes it feel like it's the ideal yoga student for you. So what is Chad's mobility like?
He's very athletic. He puts all of his effort into his practice, and he also dissects things very well. Like, he interprets philosophy and doesn't just leave it at a practice level.
Okay, and that's what I started reading in your bio. That's your teaching style. So can you tell me about what makes your class unique in relationship to that, weaving in the philosophy and the asana?
Every class, I feel like, needs a starting point, and my starting point is always a sutra or a verse or something like that. And I teach every class based on the Bhagavad Gita Sutra 518, which talks about equal vision or same vision. And my goal is to help students realize the oneness of being, or begin to leave duality behind. And I feel like what makes my class unique is there's always a deeper meaning behind everything that we do.
Okay, this is really good. So all of this wording, I'm glad that we're recording today. We're recording not only for the podcast, and I also really have to say that I appreciate you doing this with the intent of then sharing it, because this is hard work to find that person and then to be able to see yourself outside of that. So one idea right off the bat is to ask some of your students for testimonials of what they think makes your class unique and what really draws them to your class.
Actually, I did that when I was working on my About Me page, actually. And I kept getting the response, your class is very spiritual. Your class is very about God.
Is that how it feels to you?
Yes.
Yeah. And so let's look at then, we already know that Chad's activity level is athletic. Around what age is Chad?
In his early 20s.
Okay. And what is his stress level like in life?
Not much.
He doesn't have a lot of stress.
No.
Okay. And then what sort of goals does Chad have for health and wellness?
Overall, he wants to be healthy. I don't really know what kind of goals you mean.
Okay. So that might be something to dig into a little bit to find out what some of your students' goals are, like what they hope to gain from the yoga practice. Now, it already sounds like probably you're going to get a similar response back, that they want that spiritual connection. That's why they're going to your class. They don't just want to go to an exercise class, right? They're not going to go to, like, say there's a yoga flow class that doesn't dive into any of the yoga philosophy. Those people are not going to be drawn to it. So with that in mind, we really want to keep that wording in your bio, which you already have some of that in there now.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like what you said is very true. I feel like my students are very devoted to me. Like at my studio, they only practice with me. But I was wondering, how can I expand my students? Like I was curious, your opinion, the term God in my bio. Like I struggled with a while with being too spiritual in my bio. I didn't want to turn people off to the practice because of the connotations that come with the word God or self-realization. Do you think it should not be used?
So my question would be, do you use that kind of wording in your class?
Definitely.
Okay, so you sure don't want someone showing up who's like, I just want to go to yoga class where I can become bendy, and then they show up and you're talking to them about spirituality and God and oneness and connection, and they just think, oh, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
You want them to know that right off the bat looking at your website. And I like the way you've worded it when you say unapologetically spiritual. That's the first thing that you say, because you're really owning it. Mm-hmm. And you could even share some of this. So let's see if we can dig into a story here. What was your first yoga class like?
My first yoga class, actually, I didn't like yoga. My first or second yoga class, they were Anusara classes, very different than the Ashtanga practice that I fell in love with. My first yoga class, I was very turned off.
So do you know why?
I think I was very turned off to it just being completely different, completely abstract. And the teacher's very poetic and embracing philosophy, coming from a Western mindset of everything is closed,
Okay, so in your own story, you had an aversion to exactly the type of class that you teach. Is that what I hear you saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So this is a really important piece, because when you say that you're trying to bring more people in, because if I read your bio, I would just think, well, maybe you were born that way. Like you are just that spiritual and you get things. But I think so can you think back to where the pivotal point was where things shifted for you?
Yeah, I decided not to go back to that studio. I went to an Ashtanga studio, and I feel like the first time I practiced that style of yoga, I think I always say this to people, it was when my mind and my body began to change. I realized that there was something deeper than mind and body that wasn't changing. And that's when I really got hooked on the spiritual aspect of yoga.
Do you remember, was it in class? Was it after class? Was there a moment where you were thinking, this is so much different than that other class for me because...
I think it was the physicality, and it was in Shavasana. I remember it exactly.
What was it like for you in Shavasana then?
I was trying to give it a name, and I finally came up with a term, like a glimpse of God is what I now would like to call my very first glimpse of God. It was a state of bliss that I've never experienced before.
Okay, that is such good wording. So you can, I would say, keep telling that story. I don't know if you have any other details that you want to share now that would kind of bring us into that moment.
And it's really hard to explain.
Mm-hmm. And this can be sometimes the tricky part, is that these are stories that are not just easy to explain, especially when we're dealing with like a state of bliss. You know, we can write that, but it's hard to convey what that really felt like. So I think if you start from the beginning of that story and say you didn't like your first 2 yoga classes, and then you decided to stick with it, do you know why?
After reading the autobiography of a yogi, I wanted that experience.
Okay, so make sure these points are in your story. So you first went to 2 yoga classes, didn't like them. Then you read this book. Do you remember what about that book really caught you and thought, I want that?
Yes, when he met Anandamaya.
Okay. Do you have any other parts of that feel like it was really crucial to you going to another yoga class, the 3rd yoga class?
I just felt like he had it's hard to put into words. He had such a deep understanding of everything Yogananda did, and I kind of craved to know more.
Okay, and how old were you then?
I was 21.
Okay, so I think that's an important piece of the story as well. I feel it is. I feel like being 21, I just think about my own life and what it was like to go from teens to 20s, and then you're supposed to be this young adult. And really, in the grand scheme of things, I'll be 41 this year, and I still feel like I hardly know anything. So I think it's important to try and convey that feeling a little bit more in your bio story. So you might write this story out, and it might become really lengthy, but you went to 2 yoga classes, you didn't like them. Then you read the book. I would even go back to the book and see if there's anything that you can find in there. Then you went to the 3rd yoga class, and you had this experience, and somehow I would keep diving into what that experience really felt like for you. Then you experienced this connection to God, this state of bliss. And somewhere along the line, then you decided, I want to be a yoga teacher. Do you know what that was like?
Actually, I was asked to assist one day in the shala at the studio, and the Mysore studio, and it was the most humbling experience. I felt like I was actually serving people for the first time in my life. And when I was doing it, I wasn't looking at them as a person, but I was looking at them as someone capable of divinity. Does that make sense?
That's beautiful. And I would include that as well, because how amazing is it? And how old were you then when you first assisted?
22.
Okay, so 22. I'm thinking back to my age of 22, and I wasn't doing that yet at all. I did not have life figured out in that capacity. So that makes me feel more connected to you listening to that you went and you served, and then you were able to see something. Like you said, you were able to see the divine in these beings in the class, and you felt like you were serving. So that's what inspired you to become a yoga teacher.
Absolutely.
Okay, so all of that stuff definitely needs to be in your story, where someone feels like they're listening to your story, and then there was this pivotal moment in your life. Now, what did you gain from not only doing yoga, but then taking your yoga teacher training? There's a little bit more to the story. I'll see if I can ask some more questions and see if we get there.
What made me decide to do teacher training?
Yeah, maybe.
The more I practice seeing students in their divine self, I wanted to try to experience seeing everyone that way.
Okay. Then when you took your yoga teacher training, how was that experience?
My yoga teacher training, my first 200-hour yoga teacher training was an individual Ashtanga teacher training. So it was one-on-one.
Wow.
But it was very intense. My teacher was very intense.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like without the individual teacher training that I took, I wouldn't be the teacher that I am today. Like, it pushed every button in my body. I hated him at points. I cried. I begged him to let me go to the next posture, because in Ashtanga you have to wait to master a pose before you can go to the next asana. But now I'm so thankful for John and everything that he did.
That's pretty rare. That's the way yoga used to be taught, and now it can be the exact opposite of that, a really packed yoga teacher training. So that's quite an experience. What continues to draw you to the philosophy side of yoga?
There's so much to explore. And if you think of it, to me, mathematics come from yoga philosophy. Astrology comes from yoga philosophy. We now have so many science-based conclusions that all originate from the rishis in their meditative state. I just feel like if they knew so much about things that have been proven, what is to say that they don't know the things that we can't experience through the five senses?
Right. And so when someone like Chad, this ideal yoga student, first came to your yoga class, had he been to other yoga classes?
I'm actually not so my ideal yoga student. Maybe. I would say they would need to know. I'm not really big on teaching alignment and things like that. So I like intermediate students.
Okay, so this is getting a little more, and it might feel scary at times to niche down like that, to say, I don't want to deal with beginner students, I want intermediate students, but I think it's very wise. I think the more you niche down, the more students you're going to see come to your class, but I understand that it does feel the opposite. Just like when you said, I'm not sure about putting that God word in there, you were afraid that you're going to turn some people off of your yoga classes, but really by putting it in there, you're saying that is already part of my classes.
Yes.
It's a thread in there. So why does Chad choose to go to your yoga class as opposed to another yoga class? And maybe he does go to other ones, but why does he choose yours over a general yoga class?
I really feel like I combine a lot of, like I said in my bio, I try to create an experience. Like I feel like my classes, I spend 7 to 8 hours in every class that I teach to make sure the sequence is well, the playlist is right with the sequence. I feel like coming to my class, you experience an art. You experience yourself unfolding from the inside out.
Wow. And I think that attention to detail, you may want to bring that in. I think it's really impressive that you spend 7 to 8 hours planning the class, only because I know what kind of work is involved in being a yoga teacher. And I'm not trying to make our listeners think, well, I don't spend 7 to 8 hours, I'm just kind of throwing it together in 30 minutes. There's no shame in that. But I think that you saying that you really want to create an experience for your students, I think that needs to be part of the explanation of who you are as a teacher. I don't know if you then have any testimonials from your students. Those are nice to add in there in your About Me page.
Yes, that's a good idea. We always, at our studio, at the end of every class, if they sign up with ClassPass, they have to take an online survey. And at the end, it always asks for testimonial that the teacher gets back at the end of the month. So I do have a lot of that.
Oh, that is fantastic. What a great system. So tell me that again. When they go to sign up, it automatically takes them to a little survey?
When they sign up, after they come to the class, they are emailed a survey, and it's how the teacher did they enjoy the class, what could be improved, what couldn't be improved, and things like that.
Okay, that is brilliant. That's a great takeaway for our listeners to because I know sometimes it's difficult to get testimonials, so that's great. I would look through those testimonials and see what ones really resonate with the exact message that we have going on for sure. A couple other notes on this. Start to look at what are the challenges and struggles that Chad faces in his life. So we might think, well, this guy has a low stress level, he's athletic, he's in his early 20s. Someone looking from the outside in might think he doesn't have struggles, but I think a lot of us know that every being on the planet is struggling in some way. So what maybe are his struggles?
I feel like a lot of my students, including Chad, are the very artistic type of people. And I feel like they struggle a lot with creativity. And I also feel like my students struggle a lot with undoing the dogma that they are ingrained with and opening up to the possibility of multiple perceptions existing in the same realm.
These are both really good. So do you address those challenges in your classes with them?
Yeah, I always talk about perception. I'm really big on perceptive. I believe that we can change our world based on the way we perceive reality. And most of my classes are based on the concept of a verse or a sutra that relates to how we perceive reality. Because I feel definitely a lot of my students are in their 20s or 30s. They don't really have grounds in philosophy to understand that there can be multiple answers, that everything is the same. There's just different name. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think if feels like you either hit on a really important piece that needs to be in bold on your About Me page or the actual tagline. And that is for people who are struggling with. So what I'm hearing or just what I take from that is even in my own life, if I have a struggle or a challenge and I perceive that as huge, and then I learn something new or I learn something new about either the world around me or myself, my perception changes. And that has a profound ability to make me feel thankful or grateful for what I have. So what you said, I don't know if I can repeat it exactly. Can you say that again? We have it recorded. We can play it again, but
just basically perception. Perception is everything. Like, there's a book called The Inner Traditions of Yoga by Michael Stone, and he talks about the concept of shunyata and emptiness. I feel like everything is empty, and the way you perceive reality is what reality really is.
Right. The way we perceive reality is the way reality really is. And something in your tagline needs to be about that so that people can think, oh, wow, I can go to that yoga class and I may be feeling like I'm in this stuck place in my life, but the ability is there for me to change my perception on things just in this, 1.5 or 1 hour and 15-minute experience that you're giving them.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why I feel like I always include philosophy or a sutra or something that inspires me, because not only is it coming off authentic if it's inspired me, but it gives them a chance to look at the world from a different perspective.
So one other helpful piece in this is you might start to think about who are the people that you're not really wanting to come to your class, and that can help you to clarify some of the messaging around it. So if someone wanted a class with no yoga philosophy, they would not be coming to your class. What if students have chronic pain or mobility issues?
I mean, it would be a distraction for me as a teacher, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, to create a class that is an art, like the way that I like to teach. I do also teach beginner vinyasa where I deal with that, but my classes that I really teach, that I spend a lot of time on, I feel like it's an obstacle to me teaching the complete goal.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you're clear on this, because what a lot of teachers will do is they'll say, oh yeah, this is a class for everybody. And then it becomes this class for no one. It cannot be a class for everyone. Just as you took your yoga teacher training one-on-one, that's a lot of the time how yoga was taught. And that is how yoga is conveyed very effectively as one-on-one. So when we create group classes that are for everyone, we actually have so many different spectrums of the scale of mobility and ability and understanding and what they want in philosophy. So you're just sort of molding this class. Now, what we want to do is get the message out about your class so that when people see your About page and they see a description of a class, all of their questions are answered. So in their mind, they might think, is this class going to focus on the yoga philosophy? Is this class going to help me to deal with my struggles? You said the creativity is one and then the perception is another. I would dig in a little bit and ask your students what they feel like their biggest struggle is. You could do that in class. You could do it in a personal email, but I would find a way to dig in a little bit more and find out what their struggles are.
Okay. So do you think the About page should not include, or do you think it should, or is it what my class is?
Yeah, we'll keep working on it. That's a good question. I think what it should be is all about your yoga students. So that's the confusing part about an About Me page. We think that it's about who we are as yoga teachers, and what it's really about is who our students are. So everything has to address, and I don't mean to say people are really self-centered, but they are when they're reading a bio or a website. They have about 3 seconds of attention span, and if it doesn't say you're in the right place very quickly and very loudly, then they move along somewhere else. So we want them to feel like, this person gets me. And that's where your story, so your story of, I tried 2 yoga classes and didn't like them, that will grab someone's attention. And then your story of this experience of bliss or this experience of wanting to have more of that connection with the divine, whatever that is, that tied into the story is also going to draw them in. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes. Do you think my About Me page should include the fact that we chant in my class? Mantra is a big part of my teachings. The name of God is very sacred, and when I teach, it's probably one of the fundamentals of my teaching. Should my About page say that?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I've had people walk out of my class during chanting before, so maybe it would be a good heads up.
Yeah, like what to expect at my class is a great one. And I think the way you've written your bio keeps it really lighthearted. And I think keep that connection to how you were. What would you have been like just starting out with chanting in a class? And why is it that you went from not feeling comfortable in yoga to now really teaching yoga in the traditional sense, philosophy, chanting, everything in there? I think that's an important piece of the story too.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because honestly, I can't even answer that for myself.
I would look at that question then, number one.
No.
We get really used to, so you understand, and that's why you're asking the question, that chanting can make some people very uncomfortable. I remember it was my first day of yoga teacher training, and I thought, what am I doing here? We were doing a whole weekend of chanting. Mm-hmm. And I honestly thought about leaving the teacher training. And after that weekend, like this feeling of just total joy from whatever you want to call it, singing, chanting, vocalizing all weekend, that was enough to say, I really love that part of this yoga practice.
Yeah. I feel like what I want to do really in my teaching is bring out the more esoteric concepts of yoga, like the philosophy, the chanting, the yoga of sound, the yoga of devotion, the yoga of knowledge, and try to integrate all that in with an asana practice.
And your students that are going to those classes, they obviously love that.
Yes, they do.
And so when you're asking, how can I get more people to come and to give it a try? The answer is just to keep putting your message out there that is what you're offering, because there are more people that will sign up. It's not like you've, gotten all of the people that are interested in that kind of yoga. And then there are also the people who are, dabbling in different types of yoga and they're not sure. A few of the things is that you can start to create content around this.
That's a good idea. Like, I felt like once I got my About page written and I could start blogging about the concepts that I teach and what they actually mean, what the purpose of them is.
I think that's the other thing that's happening with this About page. It's like you said when you went to your yoga teacher training and you were like begging no, and you feel like that this is hard work to do this About page. And it's never done. It's never complete. It never feels, I have yet to meet someone who has their About page and they just feel like it's all there and it's
difficult because we spend like 7, 8, 9 years developing this, and then to put it into words is difficult.
Mm-hmm. But I think, humans connect to that story. I don't know if you talked to Carol Cox, who we had on the podcast. Did you talk with her?
I'll talk to her next month on the 15th.
Okay, great. Because I think that's going to also help to draw out the story. So start to, if you have a journal or if you like writing, on your computer, it doesn't matter whether I think pen to paper sometimes connects a little more.
Absolutely.
In a different way. Yeah, I'm old school. I also like to read books that are made of paper. But if you can pen to paper really journal this out and journal through the thoughts, I think you're going to find some gems in that and make the story very simple. You want to have it on one page where you can kind of grab someone's attention. Like if it says in the first line, I went to 2 yoga classes and didn't like them at all or hated them or whatever your experience was, that's going to make someone want to read like, what? I thought this guy was a yoga teacher and he didn't like yoga. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would start to really look at the bio or the About page that you've written, and every single paragraph needs to speak to that person. More so on a level of why are you telling them that? So you tell them the story so that they feel connected to you or that they find something similar with their own life. And then you tell them what your class is like, because then they're finding out, oh, yeah, I would go to that class. I would do that. It's the whole time that they're reading it, it's about them.
Okay.
It does make people sound self-centered, but it's true.
It makes a lot of sense.
And I would also add in some, some little quirky things, like what are quirky things about you? think about that, what other people might say, oh, these are your quirks.
Everything about me is quirky.
There you go. Well, you know what?
I'm very eclectic and I'm a weirdo for sure.
Do you know why? Like, is there something if you were, say you were out with a friend who knew you really well and they were going to tell a lighthearted, nice joke about you, like Trevor has this or he does this.
To be honest, my life is, everyone makes fun of me because they believe I'm addicted to yoga. Like, it's literally all I do is read yoga philosophy and sequence classes and practice.
Right.
It's everything to me.
Yeah. Do you know why that is?
To be honest, it saved my life. It changed my life. Like, I know every yoga teacher has a story of how yoga saved their life or changed their life. But for me, honestly, without yoga, I have no idea. I probably wouldn't be alive, you know? So I was at a very dark place and I was searching, and yoga was the absolute answer I was looking for.
Do you feel comfortable sharing what the dark place was like?
Yeah, the dark place was a place of despair. It was a place of I want to say loneliness, isolation, complete isolation. I didn't know myself. I had so many questions about who I was as a person, much less who the universal self was. And yoga gave me the answers to your Satchitananda, your true consciousness and bliss. Everything else is ego. In yoga philosophy, there's an answer to everything. I think you asked earlier why I'm drawn to yoga philosophy. There's nothing that you cannot find an answer to in the philosophies of ancient India.
So this is why you're reading it all the time.
It always changes my perception. I have to be open to the I think a yogi is ultimately open to every perception. They perceive reality as one. You know, so the more they understand the oneness, the more different aspects of that. The more we realize the similarities instead of the differences, the more we become aware of the oneness.
So this is a huge part of the story. When you go back and replay this, because I will send it to you, that story right there of being in that dark place, that's huge. Because when people are in, a lot of our students come to yoga because they're in a really dark place. And when you say, yoga saved my life, and then you say, you know, a lot of people will say that, you really have to see, is this a story that I want to share or not? You might share parts of it. You might keep it very, like, just yoga saved my life. I was in a dark place. It might be just that. And then there's a lighthearted part to it where you were talking about your friends, saying that you read yoga texts all the time, but it's very rooted in you saying, what I heard you say was that it's because you feel like all of the answers are there for you in the yogic text.
I do.
Yeah. So I like the mix of, you know, it's serious. It's very serious, especially when you share with people, I was in this dark place. And then there's a lightness to saying, like, my friends are making fun of me all the time because I'm so focused on yoga. That also speaks to your devotion as a teacher to learning new things, like you continue to learn. There are some teachers who say, like, I'm taking my 200 hour and then I will teach. And there are some who don't feel that constant drive to learn more and dive more into the yoga philosophy. This is what sets you apart. And it's also what sets other teachers apart. Like, it works in the same way. The more that you can connect with who you really are as this unique teacher, the more you'll be able to convey it. I think it's going to be helpful for you to re-listen to this because it's easier for me to ask questions and then you answer them, you know, just like we're having a conversation, than to sit down and think, how can I write this in one page on a website?
Yeah.
So here are some other things to think of. Think of this unique headline or tagline. So instead of writing about me at the top of your page, you know, you want something like a one sentence that really draws the whole essence of who you are as a teacher and who your student is in one sentence, which is very difficult sometimes. And it might be a belief or a value of yours. So if I pick just from our conversation today, it might be, I feel like yogic texts have all of the answers to my struggles and questions in life, or something like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Or if you listen back and really listen for what you said about perceptions, and careful not to write a paragraph. So we want to really see if we can get it in, aiming for 3 to 5 words, but it might be longer.
Okay.
So it's a tagline. It doesn't even have to be a quote-unquote sentence. a headline or a tagline. And then we want to make conversation. So write like you speak. And this is why it's helpful when we record this. You also want to think about who are you talking to. So if someone like Chad, so let's take a cookie cutter of that ideal student, Chad, but this is a brand new person who hasn't been to your yoga class or who has never been to a yoga class. And you want to explain to them about you in a way that helps them to understand, is this yoga teacher for me? Like, do I connect to this yoga teacher?
That's probably the most difficult part. I was doing some research on branding and how you have to try to address your target audience. I feel like my target audience is like the counterculture, the rebels, people searching for liberation who are not happy with everyday life. They're ready to transcend the mundane and enter the celestial realm. I don't really know the vocabulary to target that market.
You just said a lot of words that were great. Like exactly that. If you think back to your 21-year-old self or when you first started yoga, your last sentence about the celestial, what did you say again?
Transcend the mundane and enter the celestial realm.
Yeah, you might lose some people on that one, but the first part, the rebels, if they're tired of life the way it's going along now, I think that's a lot of people. Yeah, that wording works really well. I think you're on to something there, and that is exactly the type of yoga that you're teaching. Mm-hmm. But what's powerful, what I hear, is that you're not saying to people, blow up your whole life. You're saying to people, you have the ability to change your perception within your yoga practice. Mm-hmm. So you're not trying to change people around you or get a new car or listen to what society is telling you to do.
Yeah, and I think that to me, yoga has been the practice. I love asking people, what is yoga? Because that's my favorite question to ask people. There's so many different answers. But for me personally, yoga has been the practice of looking deeper into things. And when I look deeper into things, I start to see so many limitations that we have, that the mind has built. And I kind of want to teach in a way that dismantles the built-up dogma, that by introducing other ideas.
I really like this word, dismantles. I think that needs to be in somewhere. I think what's going to happen is you're going to listen to this again and then you'll think, oh my goodness, just jot things down or type this out when you get the recording back, because you're going to hear a lot of good things, and not just for your About Me page, exactly that. Like you can take one tiny piece of that and write an article of your experience or how yoga relates to that. And also, I would be interested at looking at some of your favorite class plans. So do you write them out?
My sequences? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all very based in Ashtanga primary with a little more backbending and things like that. They're all based on Ashtanga's primary sequence.
What about the beginning part when you said, I believe a yoga class should have a start or a beginning or a...
I try to start every yoga conversation with the root of the class. Like the sequence has to contribute to the theme. So if I introduce the theme, I may speak about the theme for 2 minutes, chant, do the practice, and then close with a chant and a meditation, and then shavasana.
Okay, so take a look at some of those favorite themes, like maybe 3 or 4 of those, and see if they kind of weave into explaining what your class is as well, or that might be a whole other article also.
I feel like somewhere I would like to mention the verse from the Bhagavad Gita 5:18. The verse, it talks about how the humble sage sees, with true knowledge, sees the priest, the cow, the elephant, the dog, and the outcast all the same. Like he has the same vision of them all. Samadarshan. I feel like that's the goal of my teaching, is try to get everyone to perceive oneness.
So that might be your tagline, and then to explain that. The trick with the About Me page is exactly what you're saying. It becomes this, like you could basically write a book about it.
Yeah, like I said, we spend 9 years building this,
Mm-hmm. So then we trim the words in that, and we look at, are there any words in here or sentences that aren't pertaining to this person that I'm trying to speak to? Sometimes I have to look at my own bio and look at seeing, am I just trying to list trainings and show how much I know to this person? Am I trying to tell them that I continue to take trainings?
I was going to say, and that's one thing I didn't want to do in my About Me was list any of the teachers that I have practiced with, because I don't really feel like students care, to be honest.
That's so true. I'm so glad that you said it. They don't care. And honestly, most students don't even care or don't even understand what it means to be a 200-hour versus a 500-hour yoga teacher. They just are coming to a yoga class. Like I had someone say to me, I thought you just became a yoga teacher and then you're done. Why are you taking all these trainings?
Yeah.
So I think if we are going to list our trainings, which you have decided not to do, and I think that's very wise, it either needs to be somewhere else or it needs to be at the very bottom. No, I think that's very smart. I would encourage people to contact you and to reach out so that there's either your email address there or a contact form or maybe a place where you're on social media, just so that they feel like, oh, I can reach out and connect with this person and get to know them more. Another thing to think about is a video. And I know videos are tricky to do. If you can't do a video, definitely a photo with your eyes showing. And because it's nice then to feel like, oh, I'm getting to know this person. But even a video with a light story of this is what my class is. And you might tell the story of, I went to my first 2 yoga classes and I didn't like it at all. And I felt this way, like dive into the uncomfortable feeling of it a little bit, explain that, and then say, and now what's so interesting is that this is the way I teach. And the reason it's kind of come full circle is this.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would then just take those words that you just said in the video and put them over beside and keep it really short. Mm-hmm. People shut down. Like, honestly, if people see that they have to read more than 3 to 5 paragraphs, they shut down. Mm-hmm. Online. Like, not in a book, but online they do.
I guess when I write, I need to go into like teacher mode, like cut the fluff.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's exactly, yeah, like you're trying to teach a pose and you can't draw out the sentences. That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like how you wrote in first person, and I like your introduction that just says, I'm Trevor. I really like that because I struggle with mine. It says something like, hi, I'm Shannon or something, or yeah, I'd say definitely keep that part. And also let go of, a few testimonials. Honestly, if you had 3 paragraphs and a couple of testimonials, a photo or a video, you're good. Okay. Anything that you cut out of this or any other bio that you've done, keep it. And then think to yourself, is this an article or is this a social media post or how else can I use it? Mm-hmm. Any other questions about this?
Yeah, I really like the idea of including my personal story because that's what I wasn't doing, was including how I got into yoga and what drew me to the practice in the first place. So hopefully I do see how that can make a connection with students.
Yeah, I would journal away about that. Story is how we connect. I bet you tell a lot of stories in your classes, and that's when your students will be really paying attention. Like, oh, this is a story. And then I will send you, I have a couple of worksheets. So now I've already put updates to the one worksheet, but I also have just a little checklist for an about page. So I'll send those along to you too.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right, Trevor. Well, it's been great to get to know you, and I'm excited because you're the first male yoga teacher guest on the podcast. We need that side of things as well.
That's an honor.
All right, I'm excited about your about page. I'm excited to read it soon. So thanks so much for sharing this with our listeners today.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
So there you have it, connected yoga teachers. Lots of information. Thank you again, Trevor, for just being authentic and brave to go through the process while you know that potentially other people are listening. I think it is such a value that you have chosen to share this with yoga teachers and that they can get a glimpse of the work that goes into really picking out that story, that thread that is unique to you, really speaking to that ideal yoga student and conveying a message pretty quickly because, as I said earlier, it's a short attention span that we have with online readers, generally speaking. Remember, connected yoga teachers, a website
never feels complete, especially when you are a creative being, which I know a lot of you are. So I never feel like my website is complete, and I think this is pretty normal. It's good to just dive in, share what you have. It's good. What you have now is good enough until you have something else. A couple of things to bring awareness to. Share the authenticity of what your yoga journey is. Share any pivotal point in your story and what really was the story leading you to yoga. Trevor, thank you so much for sharing that idea of a student survey automatically going out after the first class. I love that. Somehow I'd like to implement this with the students that I'm working with, just that we get a little survey and get feedback right away. I think it's a great way to check in with students. If you're looking for other ways to gather testimonials, a Facebook page works really well. You can send the link to the Facebook page. That way everyone can see those testimonials, and you can also choose which ones you use online. It's nice to ask people, can I use your name, or would you like to be anonymous on my website? You might also choose to email all of your students or do an actual paper survey at the end of a session. When you are gathering those testimonials, just remember to prompt with good questions. For example, not just saying like, how was Shannon's class, but instead saying, what do you enjoy most about yoga class with Shannon? If you were wondering what those 2 books were that Trevor talked about today in our consultation call, both of those are in the show notes. I've put links in there for you, as well as episode 21 with Carol Cox, where she works on how to refine your core message. So she digs into a little bit of that, what is your story? And I think that's very applicable when we're doing an About Me page. Now, lastly, I have a little takeaway for all of you. It's my checklist that I often use with an About Me page. Now, it's done together with defining an ideal yoga student, but I think you're going to find a lot of value just in the checklist alone. It's very point form and it's 1 page. If you have any questions about it, you can certainly post in our Connected Yoga Teacher private Facebook group, or you can also book a consultation call with me. Just go to the Work With Me tab on the website. Huge thank you to Laura, who does a fantastic job with the show notes. All of the times are there, complete list. Thank you, Laura. They're amazing. Also, thanks to Rob for putting all of the audio together, and to Schedulicity, our sponsor. Take care, Connected Yoga Teachers. See you here next week.